Good afternoon. My name is John Strope. I'd like to welcome you to the Nebraska State Historical Society's Brown Bag History Lecture Series. Lectures are held monthly on the third Thursday. Today we are in room 303 on the third floor of the City County Building at 555 South 10th Street in Lincoln. A detailed schedule for this series, as well as information about all the Society's programs and services, can be found on the Society's website at www.nebraskahistory.org. If you are not already a member, I encourage you to join. There's a sign-up brochure back there. Benefits of membership include subscriptions to the Nebraska History Magazine and the Society's newsletter, use of a microfilm reader printer in the Society's reference room to make free copies of microfilm. Another benefit, free admission to the Society's 7 historic sites. And finally, discounts in the Society's landmark stores in the Capitol and at Chimney Rock. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to thank the Nebraska State Historical Society Foundation for the financial support which allows us to tape and broadcast these programs on public access television and on the Society's YouTube webpage. To find that webpage, just type Nebraska State Historical Society on YouTube into your browser search. There are about 120 or so shows with more coming. Our speaker is Mark Harris. 8 years ago, Mark Harris set out on a mission to portray Nebraska's contemporary rodeo culture more artistically and comprehensively in photographs than anyone ever has, and then write a book worthy of the photos. That book, Rodeo Nebraska, has recently been published by the Society. At 82 events in 62 separate locations, Harris photographed the competition, the rural crowds, and all things connected with them. He visited ranches that breed broncs, bulls, and speed horses, and spoke to hundreds of competitors. National Geographic photographer Joel Sartori calls the book a captivating tribute to rodeo like no other. Harris, a native of McCook, is Associate Director of the University of Nebraska State Museum at Morrill Hall in Lincoln. His photography has been featured in Nebraska Land and Nebraska Life magazines, and in the Nebraska History Museum's Nebraska Cowboys exhibit. For more information on the book, go to rodeonebraskabook.com. Just to let you know about asking questions, Mark prefers that you wait until the end of his presentation for your questions. Please join me in welcoming Mark Harris.
Thank you, John, and thank you to the Historical Society for having me and for publishing my book, by the way. My goal, as John mentioned, with this book was to portray Nebraska rodeos and rodeo culture as artistically as I could, but the project started like a lot of projects do. I was just having fun with my camera. I love capturing action, freezing that perfect split second of chaos which the human eye truly can't comprehend. That's all this first year was about in this book, in this project. And as it became more of a project, I began paying more attention to the people around me. Being from a small town of McCook, I saw my former self in the young people I saw. Inside the arena, cowboys and livestock explode into brief battles in which expressions don't change much from anxiety or determination, but outside the arena, I found a wide emotional spectrum on the faces of those who came to see the show. As I became immersed with this group of easygoing, dedicated athletes, I became intrigued. I needed to go deeper. I needed to write about it. Though they work ordinary jobs through the week, rodeo is central in these people's lives. It sets them apart. And through their sun-up to sundown work ethic and their enduring cowboy spirit, they reflect Nebraska's past. I wanted to know what drives them, what brought them to the sport, what it's like to compete in rodeo, and how the winners got so good. As I began talking to these folks, I started to understand how intensely focused they are and how crucial rodeo is in their lives. So this is my 8-summer-long journey, 82 events, 63 separate locations. And very quickly, I discovered that population is no gauge of greatness in Nebraska. Some of the best atmospheres are found in some of Nebraska's smallest places, like Clearwater, Callaway, Bladen. These are tiny specks on the map where people have converged for generations, places far from the monotony of Interstate 80. This is beautiful Nebraska. Competitors and rural families drive many miles to attend, and often these are backlit by county fair rides, and there's a peace and calm about these places. As I got to know these people, I found myself wondering, what will rodeo look like in 100 years? People don't just decide to rodeo one day. It's a lifestyle. It's implanted early or not at all. So for 8 years, I looked through the lens and stopped moments of time. Let me take you into the arena now, starting with the oldest rodeo event of all, bronc riding. Unlike bulls, bucking broncs don't hold grudges. Anxiety replaces fury. They only want the man off their back and out of the arena. Bronc riders are at risk, but they don't face the threat of attack by the animal that threw them. Broncs are generally larger than an average horse and madly averse to people controlling them, touching them, and especially sitting on their backs. They're primed to explode when the gate opens, and they do so forcefully and hastily, seemingly out of their minds, just so eager to get the man off their back. Some fall into a violent but predictable straight line bucking, and men on their backs usually make the ride. Others gyrate in midair and land with erratic jackhammer bounds, and their riders often get a face full of dirt. Young horses might forfeit their own balance to dismount the rider. Here, both will go down. Both soon rise, though, and the man will grin and the horse will grunt and continue throwing dirt. For winning bronc riders, it's about control, not controlling the horse. The horse will do whatever it wants. It's about the rider's rhythm with the horse's bucking style. It's all about center of gravity and anticipating 1 microsecond to the next. It's about a lifetime of being on horseback. Of this bad ride, this young man told me I should have lifted my rein and got back down in there. You got to scratch, claw, or bite. You got to do whatever it takes not to get thrown. As opposed to saddle bronc riding, where men use stirrups and a rein, bareback riding is sitting on flesh and bone with no place to put your feet and nothing but a small handle to hold one-handed. To compete here is to lean back and brace for hell. It's second in injuries only to bull riding. Bull riders have told me they would never ride bareback, and they're sincere about that. Bulls are meaner, but the athleticism and determination of these horses is unmatched. Injuries are inevitable. At one event, a bareback rider talked about once sitting in the back of an ambulance after a ride gone bad, bloody napkin in each hand, one for his nose and one for his mouth. Dazed, he wondered why he had candy in his mouth. Turned out it was part of his tooth. His face was broken, yet the next year he was back riding as the state's champion. He said, as they all say, it's the biggest adrenaline rush you'll ever feel. Adrenaline. That is the key word in this sport. Everyone is addicted to it. The men, the women, the youth, the men working the arena. And the closer I got to the action, the more addicted I became. These are powerful animals, and being on them or even being near them in action really reaches deep inside. It's primal. When the 8-second horn sounds, in ride the pickup men. These guys have horseback skills matched by few in the world. A bareback rider once told me I wouldn't take their job for nothing. And that's because they work in dangerous, hot, dirty conditions all night long, as opposed to maybe 15 seconds in the arena. Their horses are highly educated and prized. The pickup men provide the bronc rider a relatively safe opportunity to dismount. Miss the lunge though, and it's like shooting off a water slide into a pool of dirt. Some riders just opt to bail off, kind of like jumping out of a car heading off a cliff. There is no safe way to dismount a crazy horse. It always seems odd to me as pickup horses converge with broncs. Here you have two highly trained, well-groomed animals scuffling to pin a dusty maniac of the same species. It's just really strange. Unlike bulls, which seek a human target or the exit immediately after the human leaves their back, horses remain haywire. Sometimes the cameraman standing in the middle of the arena adds entertainment value, like here, where horses collide and then turn toward me. In wet sand, I trip backward into a backward somersault, and in a split second, my friend Kenny in the red chaps sees I'm down, and he turns hard left, pulling the ruckus barely by, maybe 3 feet between us. This shot and the previous shot are from a super wide angle lens, and like your passenger side view mirrors, objects are closer than they appear. So the crowd loves it when I fall. Most folks don't spend a lot of time wondering where these bucking horses come from or how they live. And you may have driven past pastures holding bucking stock. They don't look much different in a distance, but they are, dramatically so. I met the herd of Gypsy Joe Bucking Company northeast of North Platte one January day. They came to the pickup truck expecting grain, and so I walked among them, or at least as much as they would let me. Compared to a tame horse herd, broncs' eyes are wilder, their manes more tangled. Up close they're warier, jumpier, and most didn't let me near. Only one, named Fletch, allowed a touch to his nose. He nudged for my attention, but then became uneasy and lurching, and he shied away. When I ignored him to photograph others, he bit my back. Not to hurt me, but to get my attention so I might pet his nose again. It was a weird interaction, like dealing with a socially hindered hermit. They don't like humans in or around the arena, but they aren't fearful in their pastures, just wary. This is their world, and they live here in leisure the vast majority of their lives. Here, Zane Smith experiences the wrath of Blue Ridge, one of Gypsy Joe's craziest horses. Blue Ridge will recover from this contortion barely, and Zane will ride 8 seconds and take 3rd place. I wish I could convey the sounds here: clanging chute gates, snorting, deep grunting, pounding earth. Bronc contractors breed their own stock, but they also purchase bucking stock at regional sales where horses are bucked and then auctioned. The better the bucking, the better the price, generally from $250 to $3,000 in Nebraska. Bucking bulls are sold the same way, buck then bid. Bulls that don't buck sell cheap and often become hamburger. Bulls and broncs are livestock, which is a key word in this industry. Nearly every bull and its herd mates will end up on the dinner table someday. Only great bulls and broncs, like prized racehorses, are kept into old age to breed future superstars. This is what buckers are bred with, bucking cows, as these guys call them. Most of her offspring will go to market, but some of her sons get a shot at a long life if they're crazy enough. As one stock contractor put it, buckers are truly stock versus our trained horses where lifetimes are spent together. Broncs live great portions of their lives in leisure compared to other ranch horses. So enduring a few seconds of panic in the arena twice a week each summer is the price they pay not to work cattle year-round. They're well cared for, but it's economics, not sentiment. Using animals to compete is a touchy subject, and it's becoming more so as American society moves toward a more urban mindset. I understand each side's rationale. Being a full-blown animal lover, cruelty to animals makes me furious, but I am also the grandson of a Wyoming cattle rancher, and I have spent a good portion of my life in that world. So being a city dweller with some ranching background, I'll try to balance the perspectives. Animal advocacy groups serve a crucial role in helping direct the advancement of civility toward animals. And at various degrees in different societies, humans have a long path to travel before becoming truly civilized towards animals and towards each other. The future will judge what is right or wrong about all society's practices, including rodeo. And for decades, rodeo rules and methods have evolved towards safer, more humane use of animals. There are some widespread misperceptions held by advocacy groups and by the general public, though. One regards flank strap use. The commonly accepted myth is that flank straps cinch around a bucking animal's scrotum. Well, a distant view might lead to that conclusion, but straps actually attach ahead of the animal's hips. And true, horses and bulls don't like things wrapped around their hindquarters, and people are indeed being unkind by imposing this added stress, but it's mental. There is no physical harm. Soft and affixed only, tight enough to stay put, straps and ropes are not designed to constrict or to inflict pain. I have heard announcers explain that broncs and bulls are simply tickled by straps and ropes, but that's an understatement. They hate it. I mean, what animal wouldn't? And though broncs know their job when a mound mounts them, in my opinion, they dislike everything about the arena, regardless of what precautions men take to improve their safety. And that will probably never change. If they enjoyed their work, they wouldn't act like broncs. A few stock contractors and bronc riders have told me they believe that broncs thrive on the challenge of dismounting the rider, but to me this is to anthropomorphize these animals, and after observing hundreds of rides, I'm sure they do not see it as a challenge. It's just pure anxiety. And terrible incidents do happen. I have seen them, and they're really heartbreaking, but they're also very rare. Statistics back that up, and there is no contrary data. Several national studies have consistently shown injury rates to be about 0.0005 per rodeo, which is, for instance, 38 animal injuries out of about 72,000 interactions per year. My regional observations align with these national studies. Of the 82 events I photographed in Nebraska, in sanctioned events, I saw 3 animals injured out of roughly 5,400 arena exposures. Most advocacy groups focus on calves being roped and steers being wrestled, and at times it does look traumatic when a rope flips a running calf, and being roped and tied certainly is not a good moment for them. On very rare occasions, things go wrong and animals can be hurt, but after watching 2,000 men's roping and wrestling events, I have never witnessed harm to the targeted animal. It's important to remember that their skin is leather. Their neck muscles are thick, and though it's true that these animals endure several seconds of distress at various levels, we shouldn't imagine their bodies being affected in the way our vulnerable bipedal frames would be under the same circumstances. According to the equine database, horse racing in the U.S. has an animal death rate 3 times rodeo's injury rate. So draw your own conclusions, but when considering what role livestock have in our society, it's important to keep things in perspective. The human race is deeply immersed in the practice of using animals for work, food, and sport. On a worldwide scale of animal suffering at human hands, how high does rodeo really rate? Performing in dramatic contrast to wild animals are the roping and racing horses. Speed horses are beloved, pampered, highly trained super athletes. Few closer partnerships exist in any sport than the timed event rider and their horse. Timed events are roping, wrestling, and barrel racing. Horses seem catapulted as calves or steers are released into the arena. The calves never hesitate. They want out. They run without strategy toward open ground and toward escape. Young men don't fare well in this event. That's my observation anyway. Champions are made by decades of practicing quick, subtle motions. Never does one outwardly celebrate a good performance in Nebraska speed events, nor does one fuss over failure. It's about respect toward their competitors. It's rare behavior these days in American society, and it's perpetuated by the cowboy culture. A fully trained calf roping horse, a finished horse as they're called, costs anywhere from generally $30,000 to $150,000. In regional rodeo, cowboys and girls are more likely to buy a partially trained horse and finish the training themselves, or buy an older finished horse with just a few good years left in him. Steer wrestling horses are explosive. The men seem nuts doing this, but there is an art to it. It takes a big guy to bring down a 500 to 600 pound animal, and it takes guts to do it off the back of a horse moving at 30 miles per hour. More judo than tackling, really. It's about upsetting the steer's balance in flowing motion. Where the head goes, so goes the body. Those men making it look easy have years of experience and a phenomenal horse. I'm told that some of these steer wrestling horses are as fast as any horse in the world for the first 50 feet. It's about lineage and training. Top steer wrestling horses are trained only for steer wrestling. Some of them are so specially trained they're not good for anything else. They're hard to ride around the pasture because they just want to sprint. Just as the men do, cowgirls love the challenge of helping younger horses improve. And like great competitors in any sport, these ladies crave competition. Barrel racing horses live for this. This is what they are on earth to do, nothing else. You can see the eagerness in their eyes, like a hunting dog hitting the field. Men love their horses, but women are more outwardly affectionate, more likely to pat their horse's neck after a good performance. If I had to be a horse, I would want to be a woman's rodeo horse. In women's breakaway roping, the rope breaks free once the calf is roped, and winning times are ridiculous, a couple of seconds maybe. Striving to achieve thoughtful, self-imposed challenges as every year goes by, this is how these men and women win. They are incredibly driven to succeed and to improve. Team roping is a big deal in the rodeo world. Team roping only events have grown exponentially during the last 25 years after national roping associations have created a handicapping system similar to golf, in which ropers compete against people only as good as they are. This system allows everyone in the family to compete and to have their fair chance of winning big money in their division. Spouses often watch each other compete, hoping one will end up in the money, but it's not about the money, it's about the passion. It's a traveling roadshow where kids might compete against parents, and horses are trained specifically for each event. In their trailers, each person might have a horse for breakaway roping, for barrel racing, for steer wrestling, for tie-down roping, and for team roping. Just like players on a football team, these animals know how to do one thing very well. They are bred to be high-end, specialized athletes. So where do they come from, and what makes them phenomenal? These questions led me to the Pitzer Ranch near the town of Erickson in Nebraska Sandhills. It's a quiet powerhouse in the quarter horse breeding industry. A dozen studs with specific lineage to one very famous horse impregnate 350 to 400 mares annually. Half are bred naturally and half via artificial insemination. And though I do sympathize for what science has done to these poor studs' sex lives, controlling Mother Nature does add precision to the process. Recipes are now written for 21st century horse herds. Breeding for color is a factor as well. Certain colors sell better, such as buckskin, roan, palomino, gray. Disposition is also central. Say those on the Pitzer Ranch were looking for the ones that act like a Labrador puppy. There aren't as many cowboys in the world now, so these horses have to be calm and quiet. Trainability trumps physical qualities in a rodeo horse. As in people, the best athlete in the world must train well to perform at an elite level. There is no such thing as breaking a horse these days. Training is humane. It's even sweet. Caught and led around the training pen for 20 minutes, foals have their first human contact when they are 3 to 4 months old. And this is the only close human interaction they receive for the first 2 years of their lives. School starts a full 2 years later. And then all new horses get the same start. Standing in the center of a small round pen, the trainer urges the horse to run perimeter circles. The first thing the horse learns is to hoe, or to stop, as the trainer throws his arms up and cuts off the horse's path. And once that is understood, the next stages follow, with petting and rest in between. They're trained in a sequence to tolerate a halter, then a saddle blanket, a saddle, and finally a rider. A novice 2-year-old learns all this within only 2 hours. Contrary to typical Western movie scenes, training is a loving process. Though a horse occasionally goes ballistic, most soon realize that having a human on their back isn't that big of a deal. Arena riding soon follows, and soon after, the trainer and beginner are out in the hills, riding all within the same day. And then they're set loose with the herd and left alone for another full year until ranch training begins. In ranch training, quirks are exposed and ironed out. Trainers also look for horses with traits well suited for rodeo competition. Those with promise are trained further than a typical year it takes to make a great ranch horse, and their prices rise accordingly. As it was put to me, spending $50,000 on a horse is no big deal to some folks because they may win it all back the next weekend. A finished Pitzer horse can sell for up to $150,000. A good trail horse costs much less, maybe about as much as a new pickup truck. The Pitzer Ranch holds an annual invitational where Pitzer horse owners come from around the U.S. to compete in a series of diverse events. Half are standard rodeo speed events, but the biggest sensation is the ranch trail course. Like a backcountry steeplechase mixed with ranch tasks, the course is designed to test the physical and mental limits of both horse and rider. And men compete against women on this course. It's fair because the horses are the stars, and their grace and speed is astonishing. In 2014, Lakota Pappan of Missouri took second place on her red roan barrel racing horse named ID. Lakota trained her horse hard for the ranch trail course because pedigree means nothing without practice, and ID ran as if for her life but was barely winded afterward. It also takes sheer grit from both horse and rider. There is a horse under this man. Horse lost its footing sprinting across the river. So the man will slide off, grab the saddle horn, wait for his horse to find footing, and then slip back on to the saddle as the horse rises. Both emerge soaked but sprinting. I imagine this has happened to them before when I saw it. At the finish line, they pass through a gate next to a roaring branding iron oven, and not one horse out of 75 blinked an eye at the thing. The Pitzer folks forecast an increase in hobby horse people, and breeding will need to lean that way. Rodeo jackpots will keep getting bigger, so that demand won't decline, but generally, horses will need to be gentler. They compared it to breeding lapdogs versus coon dogs, breeding less for ability and more for personality. Nebraska cattlemen don't necessarily need horses to control their herds with today's four-wheelers. I have a love affair with certain rural stretches in this state. On some, one can drive 30, maybe 50 miles without seeing another human. And they lead to peaceful places and little pockets of rural subculture. When I think of small-town Nebraskans, I think of blue irises inherited from northwestern European ancestors, Germans, Czechs, Swedes, Danes, and Irish. Generally recessive blues and greens noticeably outnumber browns. Point a camera toward a group of kids, and each individual presumes to be the central subject, aim squarely at an adult, and they move out of the way looking behind them to see whose limelight they're spoiling. It never fails. I love photographing kids, fully candid, which gives me just a full second or two before they either mug for the camera or shy away. Rural rodeos bring an interesting mix. There are plenty of real cow kids like this boy hanging out behind the chutes with his dad. And then there are the locals. These kids usually find each other around the grandstands where they fuse together. I find that the diversities we have in Nebraska are more apparent in our youth, before aging makes us more uniform somehow. I sometimes feel humans sort of meld in appearance with those around them as time goes on. I have no solid theory about it, it's just an observation. But there is no denying the beauty of youth, their innocence, their curiosity, their raw emotions, their honesty, and this worked out for me and my camera. I also discovered that without fail, older women are mortified when I point a camera their way, but their spouses couldn't care less, and they chuckle at their wives' insecurity. Mutton bustin', translated, is sheep riding. And many future adult competitors first ride the wool. Not all, but many Nebraska rodeos buck sheep for kids. There is no minimum age limit. If you can grab 2 fistfuls of wool and hang on, then you qualify. These kids are country tough. They are your future rodeo competitors, and they started riding horses before city kids started riding bikes. Bullfighters serve as safety valves, catching runaway sheep with clinging kids, and they also serve as post-crash counselors once kids go down. And many will end up nose first in the dirt, and these sheep are fast. Older kids, serious about the sport, compete in junior rodeos scattered across Nebraska. Perfect preambles to high school rodeo. Junior competitions lead to performing in the big show one day. Horses are their bicycles, their video games, their soccer, their YouTube. Those who have parents competing in rodeo will likely follow. These boys will ride bulls someday. At this event, one adult straddled his bull and asked for a spot, which is asking for someone to hold his vest in case the bull acted up. So a small 12-year-old rider realized he was the only one that heard the request, and he moved in and grabbed on. Another man finally noticed and stepped in, and grinning, the adult said to the boy, "I like that little man, but I don't think you got enough lead in your ass." On the opposite side of the spectrum from kids are the seniors, and there is a precarious balance between greater experience and older age in this sport. Older fellows still competing have my utmost respect. At an age where most gentlemen are thankful to get in and out of a recliner without difficulty, here we have seniors jumping off horses to tackle steers. These guys live for these moments. It defines who they are. What drives them is the same thing the younger riders talk about, the adrenaline high and the need to succeed. I've asked these folks what factors play into the decision about when to quit. One thing is made clear: it won't be about pain. Not being competitive anymore. That is the only deciding factor. These folks are addicted to the camaraderie of other horse people. Age be damned. But there is plenty of pain involved. Trust me, old folks don't mend as quickly. This man is over 60, and I wondered how he felt the next morning. Your typical Nebraska rodeo is comprised of crowds and competitors who are patriotic, religious, and Republican. I know that's not new information, but it's worth noting how prevalent it is. This is a very red state north and west of Lincoln. This is how these folks grew up, and it's how they'll raise their own. It's rural Nebraska. There's a peace and safety in these places, a serenity that I love. I'm reminded of my own youth, and I want to go back in time just for a little while, maybe have a hot dog, no worries about the coming days. Some towns have really loose rodeo policies, and pickups backed up to the arena get the best seats. It's a social time, and sometimes the town's biggest event of the year. There are no local authorities who must give a green light to parachutes landing in town arenas. Gangs of kids roam. If you drop $1, they'll chase you down to get it back to you. Small town culture goes a long way toward raising good people. As the rodeo starts, a sash-draped rodeo queen on horseback races the American flag around the arena, and the announcer talks of patriotism, freedom, and our troops. Heads bow for a lengthy prayer tailored with a rodeo theme, and hats and hands cover hearts while a local sings the national anthem. It smells of popcorns and hot dogs in the stands and of dung and urine behind the chutes. Nebraska's summer evenings can be oppressively hot and humid. Heat indexes in the 90s are common. Again, it's not news to you, but worth noting, it can be nightmarish for humans and animals both. The worst I endured was a hazy 114 degrees in Walt Hill. And sweaty people glisten, and they fan their faces with programs. And livestock stand statuesque. Porta potties are hellish torture chambers. Rain doesn't stop a rodeo, and rarely does lightning. In conditions that would send soccer moms sprinting for cover, rodeo folks don't flinch. Many of these people work outdoors, and they haven't been struck yet. Bull riding is the last event. Hard rock music signals its start, and bulls hate that. They're kind of conditioned to despise the sound of AC/DC, just like a lot of parents were in the 1970s, I think. And they begin breathing harder, and mucus flows from their noses. They thrash. They want out, and they want to hurt someone on their way. Nervous riders stand over the animal they drew, stretching and jumping, and they share encouragements with their competitors. These guys come from ranching families where politeness is deeply ingrained in culture. They say sir and ma'am to strangers, but I found they cuss like the rest of us when left in each other's company. Bull riding is electrifying. Men with nothing more than plastic swatters enter pens to shoo agitated bulls into narrow pathways that lead towards the chutes, and their horns clang all the way through. Younger bulls might freak out, making impossible leaps toward freedom. Bulls know they will dismount the man. It's guaranteed. And then, when the gate swings, if the bull chooses, he will have his brief opportunity to crush and to maim. The bulls average 1,700 pounds, with some well over 2,000, and they're quick to anger. Bulls nap before each event, but moods change when contestants appear. This one was like a rabid junkyard dog, heaving himself toward every cowboy that passed, and at the camera guy. He wanted under this bar to get at men, and he tried time after time as hard as he could. Later, he threw his rider in about a second and attacked him when he was down. The rider was saved by bullfighters who were also attacked relentlessly. People don't just wake up one day and decide to become a bull rider. These guys come from agricultural backgrounds, and they're raised as cowboys. Starting young, they ride sheep, then calves, then steers, and of course, they ride horses throughout their lives. A cowboy's sense of balance on a moving animal is well tuned, but it takes a certain type of young man to take the final step and get on top of a full-grown bull. One veteran was thrown 10 feet in the air and landed on his head. Muscle memory hurried his body to the fence, but he knew something was wrong. He said his whole body shook uncontrollably, and the next year he told me, "It took me 7 months before I could get back on a bull after I broke my neck." And to me, that sentence sums up the abyss between bull riders and everyone else on this planet. Wrecks, as they're often called in bull riding lingo, can be so violent that it makes pro football seem like child's play. Another rider I know lost 3 teeth in a wreck that knocked him unconscious for 4 hours. And great portions of his memory from that day and the following day were simply deleted. But when he awoke in the hospital, he knew where he was by recognizing the x-ray machine from his previous year's wreck. These guys are glorious adrenaline addicts, all of them. Part of the adrenaline rush is about a chemical called norepinephrine, often associated with our body's fight or flight response. It makes our brains and bodies work faster and better. Its illicit drug cousin is amphetamine, speed. And though adrenaline may drive them, I have noticed specific human traits in the successful rodeo competitor formula. Type A people. These are guys and girls who succeed in anything because they work relentlessly toward long-term goals. Toughness, and more specifically, toughness gained from working with livestock, natural athletic ability, and a bit of obsessive compulsiveness is required. Toss in the lure of recurring all-natural shots of addictive neurotransmitters, and there you have the outstanding rodeo competitor. Not to be confused with rodeo clowns, bullfighters save downed riders from angry bulls. Theirs is the most serious job in rodeo. Some wear makeup, most don't anymore. This is a rodeo clown. Years ago, clowns served as bullfighters as well, but today's bulls are too nasty. It takes specialists. It takes athletes. Clowns will jump in to help fight off a bull if need be, but they're mainly comics who fill the void between rides. Bullfighters face every single bull all evening long. Everyone says they're crazy, including the bull rider who broke his neck and returned to ride again. It's insanely dangerous work, but in this work, they're heroes and they receive the very highest doses of adrenaline. Inexperienced bulls pose a bigger risk. They're most likely the hotheads that will attack. They're the bellowing ruckus kicking at their metal prison, more likely to attempt escapes rather than to settle in and endure as the old guys do. After the ride, old bulls often seek a way out rather than looking for payback, but nothing is predictable. And if older bulls attack, they're better at it. A hung-up rider is one terrible scenario. Men caught this way flop helplessly, like a windsock, off the bull's side. Bullfighters throw themselves headlong into the bull, trying to loosen the rope with a tug. They lurch side by side with the stranded man as the bull thrashes. Clowns break character and join the fray. Here, 12 years old and hung up on his bull rope, this junior bull rider will endure many seconds of terror until he's freed by bull riders. Others might spill into the arena if nothing works. Riders, stock contractors, event organizers, shoot bosses, they lunge at the bull's neck and head. They ski through dirt, latched onto the tail. Like a band of marauding ants, their human mass slowly brings the giant to a near standstill while the rider's hand is finally freed. I've witnessed the same heroic phenomenon when men rush in to form a barrier around a grounded, unconscious man. Knees bent in action stance, arms raised to look larger, there they stay until the bull is out. Physically, this human fence presents no more of an obstacle than a ring of toddlers would to a man, but these men would rather take a hit themselves than allow the bull to grind its hard parts into an unconscious person. It's camaraderie. It's the cowboy code. Bullfighters tell me to control a bull, you go to the head. You control where the head goes, you control where the bull goes. Generally, though, they do anything they can to distract the bull away from the rider. And bulls are bred for craziness, for athleticism, for anger. They're bred to buck, and they're getting meaner every season. The riders aren't evolving at an equal pace, and that's a dangerous combination. Here, champion bucker Toy Tiger on the right stands next to some yearling bulls. The yearlings will be evaluated by the breeder in his own bucking chutes. They're strapped with a remote release dummy weight, and the gate is swung. First timers might carry a 30-pound weight just a couple seconds to get used to having something on their back. As a bull's confidence grows, so does the dummy time. Some don't buck well and won't make the cut. Others go ballistic, and that makes the bull breeder happy. These are his upcoming stars, the muscular maniacs. Focusing mainly on football, a wave of well-funded sports concussion studies are now underway, and no such studies have ever looked into bull riding. All science really knows so far is that getting your head hit is not good for you, and the more you do it, the worse it is. According to UNL scientists, regardless of today's hype, scientists don't yet know the facts about long-term concussion damage. Football-focused research shows that repeated low-magnitude concussions are most common in that sport. As far as I can tell, bull riding produces a much greater incidence of single high-magnitude incidents that trigger unconsciousness. Long-term consequences of repeated severe concussions are simply unknown, but I'm guessing future studies won't bode well for bull riders. What is known is that all forms of concussion are more dangerous to youth, interfering with development and potentially causing bigger problems. But nothing short of a massive cultural shift will change the mentality of most cowboys. Undeniable scary evidence, if discovered, is the only factor that may alter when kids begin this risky sport. High school rodeo mandates helmets, but as men become boys, many abandon helmets for hats. Bull riding helmets with face masks help spread the force and slow the brain's deceleration a bit, but primarily they only shield the riders from broken facial bones and skull fractures. And that's a great leap in protection from a cowboy hat, but the brain still reverberates inside. There is no stopping that. By going through photos after the project ended, I did see an increase in the percentage of riders wearing helmets in Nebraska rodeo. In 2007, maybe 40% wore helmets. Now it's close to 80%. When scientists study rodeo concussions one day, they will also be trying to understand the cultural aspects that drive people to engage in such potentially harmful activities. What compels them to ride again after a concussion? Within the culture of all rough American sports, what is it that drives people not to disclose their injury, not to accept the risk? Understanding the psychology behind rough stock riding is key to improving long-term safety. Bull riding is not safe, everyone knows that, but in my opinion, regional bull riding is a bit less safe than national pro rodeo. Most injuries go unchecked in regional rodeo. That's why. I have seen a bull rider, or rather a bull fighter, knocked unconscious by a charging bull, only to return to the arena to fend off bulls just 15 minutes later. Another concussion could have killed him instantly. This cultural mentality also ties to ranching in general. Cowboys and cowgirls are tough. Not overtly, not with bravado, or even consciously so. It's an inherent, quiet resilience they have. This is how these competitors were brought up, how their fathers and mothers were raised, and how they will likely raise their own. Youth also clouds the line between toughness and recklessness. Just as young soldiers don't always consider their mortality, young bull riders don't always reflect on what a second concussion might do to them, or a fifth, or another broken neck. Small town rodeo is Nebraska rodeo. Steeped in tradition, this rodeo community travels the region every summer, blending in, competing, and then moving on. Urban folks sometimes join this fusion. Here, a city kid touches a horse for the first time, and it's an awesome experience, sensing the animal's immensity, its smell, and the heat and might of its breath. After the rodeo, old-timers share stories of their glory days as townfolk prolong the night drinking American brewed beer with friends and neighbors. Young men and women gather and country music blares. Dances sometimes follow the rodeo, but rodeo competitors are not going to be present. They are miles down the road, rolling home or toward the next venue. Post-rodeo dances are your typical small-town western Nebraska hotspots. Sheriff's deputies roam the grounds, but they won't be needed. Rodeo has found a solid niche in American sports, but facing factors such as unstoppable rural to urban population shifts and modern entertainment's ever-expanding choices, rodeo is likely to continue evolving. It started as a simple showcase for a cowboy's skills, but it has become something more dazzling, and it will continue pushing that way. Enthusiastic competitors and their followers will drive the sport well into the distant future. I'm convinced of that, and I'm happy envisioning that. As men become more proficient, rough stock will become nastier, speed horses will move faster, and records will break. Training harder and smarter, competitor skills will transcend what we can now imagine. It's now about animal genetics, technology, and early learning. Skyrocketing winnings in the Pro Rodeo Association, regional roping jackpots, and the rapidly growing bull riding scene will lead the way. It has become big business, with popularity spawned by regional rodeos like those in Nebraska. Safety for riders and animals will improve as techniques and technology advance. And vital to its growth, rodeo's entertainment aspects will modernize into a slicker and more colorful spectacle. And as it has for 150 years, the dirt will fly. This is Nebraska Rodeo, and within it, we see our heritage. Thanks, folks, for having me. I appreciate it. And I'll be happy to take some questions if you have them. Chuck?
Mark, number one, you've made, I think, a remarkable contribution to chronicling the sport of rodeo from
Thank
the
you.
perspective of someone other than a competitor, which is the way most of these books have been written. I think you've made a great contribution. And I'm interested in what you might be hearing from others in the rodeo world about your book in early days, because you do have a unique perspective.
Thank you, Chuck. Thanks for giving me the compliment. And the question was what I may be hearing from other rodeo competitors about my book. Well, I guess the answer is it's too soon to answer that. The book just came out. You can find out a little bit more about it on rodeonebraskabook.com. It'll be on Amazon soon. I guess I can go back and talk more about their expectations and their excitement about the book coming out. I interviewed a lot of people, visited a lot of places, ranches, and places where people showed off their livestock and their love of the sport. And they're first of all a little bit surprised to see me so far out west. They don't see a lot of guys from the east with camera equipment going to the far west rodeos, and I think they're very appreciative of that. They're eager to see it. I'm eager for them to see it, and I'm really eager to get the word out. All right. Thanks, folks. I really appreciate it.